It had been proposed 2 times before, and they just couldn't quite get it over. It was going from numbers and data to belief and human connection.
This was a $100 million NASA mission which was rejected twice. Not because the science wasn't sound, but because not enough people believed in it. You've probably had the same experience. You have a great idea, but it doesn't quite land. Because it's not the best ideas that win, it's the most believable ones. And the person who fixed this at NASA was Propster, former chief story architect who helped capture billions of dollars for NASA. So this episode is all about getting people to believe in your ideas. I think from NASA's perspective, it's often about the fascination of the story, but there's also scientific usefulness, right? So I guess that's one of the challenges. How do you pair up these two?
Scientists, technologists, engineers, sometimes they love to live in the trade space, and they want to stay there. We, through story and a methodology we created called story architecting, were able to get the teams to understand that core story and then to kind of use that as guardrails as they moved forward to help kind of balance the potential excitement of the mission with the realistic science and what they were going to actually do with the mission.
How did you convince the scientists? I could imagine that they're a bit like, yeah, that's all nice, Paul, but we've rework to do here.
Oh, exactly. You nailed it, Oliver. Especially when I was introduced as a storyteller to a lot of these mission teams, and especially the principal investigators. And so these folks have been working on this idea sometimes for a decade to finally get it funded and launched. So I had to change the story there. I had to change my own narrative. And fortunately, the first mission that I worked on, we won. It was an Earth-facing mission to look at basically air pollution, these PM 2.5 microns, from space, which was amazing. I was able to get some street cred. So I decided, after being there for about a year and a half, I decided to just call myself, in my little signature block, a story architect. And so the idea would come across that we're going to build this story together. I'm not coming in here to take over your story. I'm here to help, and let's build this story together.
And when you say we won, that means, if I understand you correctly, that you helped tell a story as part of a proposal that was funded by the government. How much money are we talking here?
Yeah, so that particular mission was $100 million, which is small.
It's good return on the story, right?
Yeah, in the NASA world. And but it was actually that, it was going from numbers and data to belief and human connection and human engagement. And also what I started to share with the scientists, the technologists, and engineers is this emotional investment in your idea by the stakeholders. And that's what really got that first one over the finish line. It had been proposed 2 times before, Oliver, and they just couldn't quite get it over. And so as we changed the story to focus on the human side of the story, that would this mission would really help. It wasn't just about the data. It was about helping us better understand and how to help these certain demographics that were particularly affected by these small particles in our atmosphere.
You probably hear this a lot, but I could imagine that people push back and say, look, Paul, NASA, I get it that they have stories to tell. You put stuff on Mars, but what about us here? What we produce, our organization, it's just not that exciting. Why should we bother? Don't bother with telling stories?
And that's a great question. And I think what folks tend to overlook is the simple impact that they're making. Tending again to look at data from the state of the art to the state of the heart, really. And everybody's doing amazing work out there. And I think they just need to look at it through a slightly different lens, the impact that we're going to make, our intended outcome, and how that really does have an effect on the world, no matter what part of the work that you're doing, right? So I think it really is about.
I guess that's why you created. Was it called the Credible Messenger course at NASA?
Yes. Yeah. So the Credible Messenger, again, part of that story architecting, we kind of have a circle, Oliver, and it kind of starts with the audience. What's your context? What's your intended outcome? What are those key messages? But then who's going to go out there and activate those messages? And so working with our friends over at Caltech, so JPL in particular is unique. we're an FFRDC through Caltech. So we're not civil servants, we're actually
Sorry, what?
Caltech employees. So Caltech out here, an amazing university, and they handle what NASA calls our prime contract. So we started before NASA, JPL. And so when NASA stood up, we were already
And
working
JPL
through.
is the Jet
Oh,
Propulsion Lab?
sorry. Yeah. So see here, I'm falling into my own jargon trap here. So NASA's Jet Propulsion Lab out here in Pasadena, California. So I was able to connect with the director of theater arts at Caltech, and
Mm.
we created what we called a Credible Messenger course. So this is a 10-week, a couple hours a week course where it's a journey of discovery for the participants to find their authentic voice, to help
Yeah.
them understand that they're the ones who can really tell their own story about their research, about their journey, and that's how you're going to connect to then dive a little bit deeper into the impact that you're hoping to create with the work and the research that you're doing.
Yeah, amazing. And it's interesting that you're not just there as the story architect to tell the story and tease it out of the scientists, but you're actually helping the scientists to become credible messengers. So I guess it sounds like you're anchoring a storytelling culture at NASA.
Absolutely. That has been our goal. We were able to then create Story Lab, which I led for about 5, 6, 7 years, where we just connected folks to the power of story. The lab in general understood design thinking because through
Mm-hmm.
our ideation process, we have concept maturity levels. And so we would help scientists, technologists, engineers go from the back of the napkin to like a baseline design. So
Yeah.
we sort of connected ourselves to the tailcoats of that and introduced narrative thinking as a broader way to have folks understand what we were trying to do with the power of story and how that can really help build belief and radiate the possibility of their idea.
Radiate the possibilities. Is that the essence of narrative thinking?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's radiating possibility and the potential excitement of an idea. Kind of baked into that is this idea of emotional investment. And so folks can really get emotionally involved. And we were able to kind of prove that in a way, Oliver, with we submit probably the most proposals than any other NASA centers. So we get the most feedback. And what we learned was this idea of emotional investment, as that increases, the critical assessment decreases. So the team is already, the review board is already kind of rooting for you because they believe in this idea and its potential excitement.
And in this credible messenger course, you said it's 10 weeks, but is there a key insight that anyone could apply?
Yeah, I would say one of the most powerful feedback that we got from one of the participants, she was also a musician. And so she kind of learned that, oh my gosh, I've got to warm up my voice just like I do when I go to perform with my instrument. I warm it up before I go and speak and talk. I need to warm up myself. And so we take a lot of different tools from breathing, from improv, right? And we help folks just feel comfortable out there. And I think the main thing, Oliver, is it's your story and you're the best person to tell it. And it's unique. So we've had folks come in and say, wow, I really like the way that she told her story. I'm going to do the same thing. And it's like, well, you can't. You have your own story to tell. And so let's work on that. And as you say, let's mine it. Let's pull it out so you feel comfortable saying it.
It's interesting that you draw from experience from theater, what happens on stage, but also Pixar, right? So entertainment. I heard there was a collaboration as well.
Yes, absolutely. We're blessed to be here in the heart of the industry in Southern California. And again, NASA/JPL tends to open some doors. It has a little bit of cachet behind it. And so we were able to reach out to the folks just down the road a piece in Burbank, understand what they think about when they're trying to vet new ideas for a story. And it's this simple power of what they call gettability. And so, do people get what we're trying to do here? And so, we were able to take that idea And of course, we had to shape it up a little bit to make it a little more relatable to the culture at JPL. And so that was the main thing, Oliver, was this idea of gettability. Is it coming across? Are you getting what I'm trying to say?
Gettability. I never heard this term. It's
Yeah.
interesting. What would be the opposite? Something too complex that people can't follow or just don't get emotionally involved in?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's that distance, that kind of coldness, that subject matter expert traditional approach. And a big part of what we did with the story architecting was trying to eliminate that shield that most subject matter experts are comfortable hiding behind, and not being relatable, not being authentic, thinking that those are soft skills as opposed to critical skills in making an impact with the complicated work that you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what specifically did you do with Pixar? Was it just brainstorming, exchanging ideas? Or I know they had some astronauts as well in their portfolio a while
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
So
I would say it was two main things. We would bring our PIs down there to share about their idea, to share about their mission idea. They were so great. They would bring together, producers, writers, showrunners, right? And they'd put us in a room, and we'd bring our 3 to 4 PIs that were in that particular call from
PIs?
NASA, where we were submitting like 4 proposals. Sorry.
What are
Yeah.
PIs?
Oh, so principal investigators. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And we the first thing is we'd say you can't use any PowerPoint. You just got to stand up and talk. And so that was a big, wait, you're taking away my tool.
The crutch.
Um, and it was great. And they get some really, really amazing feedback. So that was one thing that we would do with the Pixar Disney folks.
I was wondering, what did they learn from you? I'm sure they were also curious to meet the NASA guys and learn something from you. Must have gotten something out of this process as well.
Yeah, I think what they learned from us, which I think was similar to maybe some of the folks that they work with, is that these are lifelong missions, right? These are ideas that these PIs, principal investigators, have been working on for years and years. Their heart is on the line here. And so I think they learned the importance of the story, or maybe that just validated with them the importance of story in trying to get first time, one of a kind things accomplished. And one of them even mentioned that we feel like we have a lot in common is, with our films, with our movies, even with our theme parks, everything's kind of got to work the first time, and so we really
Yeah.
have to be thoughtful and diligent about how we design so those things do work first, one of a kind basis.
Yeah, I can imagine. And the second thing you took away from this collaboration?
So it was a simple storytelling technique that they use to vet out ideas for shorts or features, and it's called the six sentence template. Some folks tend to call it the Pixar 6 sentence template, but it's basically once upon a time, every day, one day, because of that, until finally. And so they shared with us, they were very kind to share with us the 6 sentence template for Nemo, Finding Nemo,
Yeah.
that movie. And as they shared that with us, everybody just raised their hand and said, "Yes, that is the core story of that film." I was amazed because when I brought this back to the lab, NASA is looking for what is the state of the art? What's your idea? How's it going to advance the state of the art? And then what are we going to learn? And so it really fit well with those 6 sentences, because you're kind of going from the what is to the what if to the what could be, and then how is it going to change us, as a community of scientists
Yeah.
and engineers.
Yeah, that's amazing because a story is a tale of transformation, right? So
Yes.
someone or something needs to change, which of course in Pixar movies is always the case. They clearly get it, getability, and the NASA as well, right? So I guess when it comes to something like the Artemis mission, Artemis will change something. So Artemis is the NASA program that is supposed to get astronauts back on the moon. The second Artemis mission is supposed to start in April. And it will be the first circumvention of the moon in 50 years. And that will prepare for the moon landing, which is due to happen before the decade is out. Did
Right.
I summarize it correctly?
Yes. Very good.
And I think with such a mission, obviously things change, right? Most of, I wasn't alive when the last moon landing happened, probably the
Right.
same for you. So this definitely changes something. Humans on the moon, I mean, that is such an obvious change. And there must be such a storytelling opportunity.
Absolutely. And the key there, Oliver, is to stay longer, right? So,
Mm.
when we landed on the moon last time, it was just, hey, we kind of roamed around for, a day or two and then whoosh, we were back. But now the idea is in this sequence of events, these very logical, straightforward sequences of events that we will eventually land and start creating a presence there. And then there's a whole infrastructure to support that as well. And I think the story, and you can see this already in some of the storytelling from headquarters, is trying to capture the nation's imagination once again, as it did in the Apollo days, and inspire young minds. And at the same time, some of us folks who remember that first one, right, to kind of reconnect us to that feeling of awe and wonder and what we can do when we work together.
90% of presentations are forgotten within a day, and even the best ideas get ignored. Over the last 20 years, I've helped hundreds of leaders prepare for stages like TED and South by Southwest, and the difference is always the same. Top 1% communicators, they use a system, and this system is called the Perfect Presentation Planner. Download it now, it's free, link in the description. And yet space is difficult, right? So there's always the chance that something goes wrong. So I'm guessing if you overhype it, there's also the danger that, it goes up too far and then it falls pretty hard because, some technology doesn't work and it doesn't happen for some reason.
We can't be perfect all the time, though we strive to be perfect all the time. And when that happens, again, that's when you get back to that credible messenger and the authenticity of our leaders to express that to stakeholders and the general public.
Yeah, exactly. That's the difference between real life and Pixar, right? At Pixar,
Yes.
they create the ending, and usually it's a happy ending. Space is hard, and we don't know what, if it happens the way NASA is planning it to happen.
Yeah, and that's what's really, give you a little context for that would be, I would just encourage folks to just Google, NASA's 7 Minutes of Terror, and you'll see a lot of that thinking behind a mission like Curiosity and the first landing, and what we then learned from that was, we always have cameras and instruments and sensors to help us understand how the mission is performing, right? Okay, it's great, everything's on track. But we also felt, can't those be dual use to help take the public along so they can see the engineering, they can see the amazing thought that's gone into these missions. And so with Perseverance, that's exactly what we did. And we were able to make dual use cameras. So humanity could follow along on these robotic missions and really understand the thought and the care behind them.
When the first humans are back on the moon, will we be there via a camera?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there are partners working on cameras, traditional cameras, but there are partners working on VR cameras as well. So, so one of these is I'll just make a little Felix and Paul out of Montreal, Canada. They had all their cameras. They created special cameras, VR cameras, and they were on the space station for years. Yeah. And it was great. The astronauts were basically doing the runner show. They were being camera people and running around. And that was to just bring us up to the space station. So companies like that are getting involved with Artemis to be able to capture it in multiple platforms so we can go along and be a part of the mission. Absolutely.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. This will be so exciting. What's the story architect circle?
What we had to do, again, with the culture, again, for leaders out there, you really need to understand the culture that you're within. Every institution, every company has a very unique culture. What we discovered is we needed a kind of logical step-by-step approach to story. So starting with the title story architecting to, reduce some of the stiff arms around storytelling. My small team, we started to create a methodology around story architecting. And so being able
Mhm.
to just connect with the culture with something that they could relate to and understand. Scientists, engineers, technologists, very logical, very methodical. And so we wanted to lean into that in order to help folks embrace this idea of narrative thinking and the power of story to get their ideas across and to make forward progress and impact.
Mhm. Are there specific steps that we could use as prompts? If I wanted to learn this methodology, what would I have to do?
Yeah, so I think that's exactly right. It's a series of prompts, it's a series of exercises. So it's very interactive. We actually use the power of Legos to help us as well, because what we discovered was folks in this culture sometimes aren't so good at this type of communication, but you have them build a model and they talk through that model. Wow, everything just seems to flow. So, one of our, I think, strongest prompts, Oliver, is what is your intended outcome? What are you trying to do with your idea? Most folks are a little too close to it where they haven't stepped back for months or years to really think about their intended outcome because they're so head down and trying to just hit the milestones, continue to make progress, and to try to get the funding. What's your intended outcome? And then also context, I think, is another big question that teams tend to lose sight of over time. And this kind of comes with the curse of knowledge kind of thinking, where they're so close to it that they can't see it from a fresh set of eyes. And so a lot of times we'll kind of try to help them reset their context because that's where the gettability starts. That's where the authenticity starts. That's where this emotional investment starts, is at the context of what you're trying to do. So folks can now join you on this journey as you start to explain different facets of your idea. We're all on the same page and now we're moving together through the
Yeah.
story.
And in the story cycle, are there series of steps that help me tell the story? I'm thinking like a 3 act structure of excite, disturb, assure, or the six points that are part of the Pixar story.
Yeah.
Just wondering if there's a roadmap for me. I love it. I mean, we have to be clear about the objective. We want to know what the context is, but how do I actually tell the story?
We do look at what I would call, that's part of the Pixar. The way we adapted it is what is happening today, right? So once upon a time, the Earth was warming at incredible rates. Every day scientists wondered, how could we help understand this? Possibly even mitigate it. One day, scientist idea, right? Wow, this is what we could do.
Right.
And then because of that, this is what could be. And then because of that, this is what could be. And then until finally, this is how it's going to change us. This is how it's going to fill a knowledge gap. Those are kind of the steps, that we use because they align with the review that NASA is going to be taking. So it's a little specific to the NASA process, but I think
Mhm.
very applicable to other industries to help them just get that core story and that shared story. So
Yeah.
we really do lean on kind of those 6 steps, which we kind of broke into four, and because we group the state of the art, the idea, advancing the state of the art to the what is, the what if, and the what could be.
Amazing. Yeah. And you mentioned authenticity a few times,
Mhm.
that the messenger needs to be authentic. How do you define authenticity, and like, how do you ensure that someone is actually authentic? Because it is an unnatural situation, right? If you ask a scientist or the
Oh yeah,
leader of an organization, hey, you need to stand up now and tell your story in an authentic way, they're like, I don't know how to do this. So how do you teach them?
dives right into our credible messenger training of, again, it is a paradigm shift because they are used to inform and defend. That has been their life, with their peers. They inform and defend, and who's the smartest one in the room, kind of thing. And we have to help them almost 360 that and say, you know what, you're here to be yourself and to relate to your audience. And a lot of times we start that with a passion story. So as we take them through the credible messenger,
Mhm.
we say, okay, what's a passion story? Let's go back. What made you, or what drove you to do what you're doing today? And that kind of helps. break down kind of that subject matter shield I mentioned earlier, they start looking at themselves, in a more human context as opposed to a science context or a technology context. After a few weeks of digging into that, and then they present those kind of at the midterm of this credible messenger training, we give them notes, right? So we curate some folks to come in and hear their story. And so it's this process of change, of hearing from folks that they respect. They know they have some relatability to what they're trying to do, and so they trust that those feedback, that first set of notes, and then we get into a synergy story, and we ask them to talk a little bit about when everything went right. Tell us about that. And so these are
Mm.
ways for them to connect to the heart and not to the data, because they do want to lead with numbers and they do want to lead with evidence. And we try to kind of flip the script a little bit and say, let's lead with authenticity and relatability. So folks, again, kind of like that emotional investment, they're rooting for you because now they found some common ground with you, and now they're moving forward and joining you instead of listening. You know what I mean? Like they're kind of with you now. It's more of a dialogue than a monologue.
I think that's so smart, right? Rather than you teaching them how to tell a story and be authentic, you make sure they feel it. They feel the
Right.
power of their own story and then see how other people react to it and relate to it and get it, getability. And that way they become, persuaded, I suppose, or they become disciples and from then henceforth be very enthusiastic storytellers, I hope.
Yes, no, that is the goal. And yes, and they start to believe in that power and believe in themselves. And then hopefully again they become a catalyst, or as you said, maybe kind of disciples in helping their fellow folks, hey, if this is the way you need to start thinking, in order to just make the impact that you desire to make. And I think that's where it really starts, is understanding the intended outcome or the impact that each person wants to make with their idea.
What's your story? Why are you so passionate about this?
So I love this. This is a great question. And so for me, it goes back to early in my life. I was in fifth grade at school. They let us know that this was a small kind of Catholic school, and they let us know that the folks from Mars, the big candy company, were coming in, and that our assignment was to look at one of their candies and write a story about it. And so, now that I look back at it, I thought, wow, that's a pretty good marketing, idea. And so at the time, I thought, you know what, they had these Mounds bars that were coconut covered in chocolate. It was one of their most popular candy bars. So I said, okay,
Yep.
I'm gonna write about that from the perspective of the coconut. And so it may sound like a tragedy, but it was really about the excitement that this coconut had to be selected, right, and to become a Mars bar. So I turned it in, and then a couple weeks later, I discovered that I won a prize. That they selected my story as one of the
Hmm.
best stories, and I think it was from that point on, Oliver, where I started thinking, hey, maybe this is something that I'm good at, that I enjoy doing, seemed kind of natural. So I went to university and took advertising courses with some engineering courses. My father was an engineer at a big aerospace corporation, so I kind of took both of those at the same time, but really started doing well in the advertising courses. So started heading in that direction, but also had this kind of logical side to me as well, which in the end I think led to the perfect blend to help folks in aerospace and companies like NASA. So that's kind of where it was started for me, was back in that fifth grade class.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's probably around the same age that I discovered I'm interested in communications and started to write a newspaper in my bedroom kind of thing. So
That's great.
that is funny how when you're young, these things are, they pop up and it's like, there's so many things you could be doing with your life, right? And you end up in a path. And sure, there's chance and serendipity, but there's also a sort of, we are drawn to certain areas more than others. And for me and you, clearly, it was also storytelling, communication, writing, which I very much enjoy. And, this has stuck with me ever since.
Yes, absolutely. Yep, I think you're right. It's a little maybe a little Forrest Gumpish in a way, right? You just kind of follow that feather.
Yeah, exactly. Also a good story. Paul, this is so good. I appreciate all the work you're doing. And where can folks find out more about you?
Yeah, just happy to connect on LinkedIn. So if you just want to look me up on LinkedIn and reach out, I'd be happy to connect and see what we can talk about.
Awesome. And what's your best piece of communications advice?
Yeah, so I would say for leaders in the audience and others involved in communications is a consistent cadence that works with your culture. Okay, so a cadence of touch points to listen, to dialogue, and then to progress forward. So I guess you know that would be it's not necessarily you know. Methodologies on how to create the story, but how to connect with your culture, and whether that's internal or external. Making sure that you have a consistent cadence to keep that belief alive and the potential going.
That's such good advice. And no one ever made this point here, because the opposite would be for a leader or an organization to only speak when they have something to announce, which some people do, right? And it comes out of nowhere 6 months in. It's like, okay, now we have something to announce. Now we need to get people's attention. But for everyone, it comes out of nowhere.
Right. Agreed. I think that is the traditional approach, and just to have these little touch points, and to keep folks, on the pulse of what's happening, but also to help them feel like they have part ownership in it as well. So that's where the listening part comes in, and those touch points could simply be everything from hey, we're having a little town hall, and we want to get your feedback, to we're going to have a series of talks to help folks stay connected to the direction that we're headed.
That makes a lot of sense. Paul, thank you so much. I appreciate all the work you're doing, and good luck with everything for yourself and us, obviously. See you soon.
Okay, thanks, Oliver. Thanks again. I had a great time.
Thanks for watching. If you like this episode, please subscribe to the Speak Like a CEO channel. It means the world to me, and it helps us keep bringing you world-class insights and guests.